terrified by the likelihood of losing the Republican majority in the House and facing a prospect of impeachment, Trump is determined to steal the midterm election by any means, however menacing or unconstitutional they may be, to deprive the Democrats of their nearly assured victory. The Democrats must be fully prepared to push back against any attempt by Trump to influence the midterm results in his favor. By staying alert and prepared, they can also prevent any violence that might arise from his malicious plans. Trump's recent statements and action reveal a clear plan for what he's plotting and how he's setting the stage to hijack the midterm elections. The Democrats need to take heed and counter his maneuvering before time runs out. Seeking redistricting to gain more seats in red states. Trump has aggressively pushed mid-decade redistricting in GOP's controlled states to lock in a larger Republican House majority ahead of the 2026 midterm, even over racial gerrymandering objections and Democratic walkouts. In June 2025, the Trump administration called on Republican leaders in Texas to rework the state's legislative districts to flip current Democratic districts to Republican control. Trump continues to pressure the governors of other red states to follow Texas' lead, calling for nationalizing U.S. elections. Trump has publicly urged Republicans to nationalize elections, pressing for far greater federal control over how states run voting, framed as combating fraud, but viewed by experts as an unprecedented centralization of election authority. Trump stated that, quote, Republicans should say, we want to take over, we should take over the voting, there is voting in at least 15 places. Republicans are to nationalize the voting, end of quote. Calling for proof of citizenship as a voting requirement. Trump has coupled his fraud narrative with an executive order and legislative push to require documentary proof of citizenship to register or vote in federal elections, a measure voting rights groups warn would disenfranchise many eligible voters. At the signing of his executive order, Trump said, quote, we've got to strengthen our elections, the fake elections, and the bad elections. We are going to strengthen that one way or the other, end of quote. Reigniting the stolen elections narrative. Trump has continuously repeated false claims that the 2020 election was rigged or stolen, using speeches, Truth Social posts, and commemorations of the January 6th to keep the narrative alive and to justify new restrictions and interventions around voting. Speaking with congressional Republicans on January 2026, Trump again insisted that, quote, the election was rigged, end of quote, portraying Democrats as having staged the real insurrection by certifying a fraud-ridden elections, using ICE deployment to intimidate voters. Although it is federal crime for the military or federal agents to interfere in elections or intimidate voters. Trump and close allies have floated or encouraged the idea of Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) presence near polling sites, amplifying fears, especially among immigrant communities, of targeted enforcement and voter intimidation during the midterms. An explicit quote comes from key ally Steve Bannon, signaling the Trump camp's intent, quote, "You're damn right, we're going to have ICE surround the polls comes November. We are not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again," out of quote. The Democratic leaders have their work cut out for them. They face a resolute president willing to illegally exploit federal power. To ensure that the election remains free, fair, and peaceful, Democrats must be prepared to take every step to protect our democracy, including 1. Support state legislation explicitly barring ICE and all federal immigration enforcement from operating in or near polling locations, backed by clear civil and criminal penalties for violations. 2. Massively fund and coordinate litigation teams, DNC, civil rights groups, state attorney generals, that are prepared to seek immediate temporary restraining orders and injunctions against intimidation, ballot seizures, or federal outreach on Election Day. 3. Expand robust multilingual voter protection hotlines and rapid response networks, especially in Black and Latino communities, to document incident, dispatch lawyers and train monitors, and publicize abuses in real time. 4. Recruit, train, and deploy tens of thousands of poll workers and Democratic polls monitors, especially in high-risk precincts, to observe, record, and challenge any intimidation or unlawful interference. 5. Negotiate binding election day operational agreements with local officials and law enforcement that bar cooperation with ICE at or near polling places and prioritize voting accesses. 6. Run intensive targeted public education campaigns in diverse media outlets in targeted languages explaining voter rights, what constitutes illegal intimidation, and exactly how safely report and resist suppression's attempt. 7. Strengthen the Federal Voting Rights Act, anti-immigration statutes, and clear rules on armed presence near polls through ballot initiatives where possible. 8. Build pre-election war rooms to track disinformation, coordinate rapid debunking of stolen election claims, and push clear reassurances that every lawful ballot will be counted and defended. 9. Aggressively challenge partisan purges, restrictive ID rules, and polling places closure that disproportionately affects Black and Latino voters, using data-driven evidence and emergency court filings. And finally, 10. Prepare contingency plans with our community organizations for safe transportation, early vote mobilization, and absentees voting in areas where ICE or other intimidation efforts may depress in-person turnout. It cannot be said enough that the outcome of the midterm election is fateful for the Democrats, but even more so for the country. It is hard to imagine what shape the country will be in if the Republicans maintain control of the House and the Senate for the following 2 years. Trump will be in an even more formidable position to entrench his authoritarian agenda by further dismantling our democratic foundations and obliterating what remains of America's constitutional integrity. This midterm election, I dare say, is a do or die for the Democrats. There is no room for error. They must rise in unison, leave nothing to chance, and follow the example of existentialists like Sartre, who often argued that actions, not wishful thinking, define outcomes.